The South China Sea is one of the world's busiest waterways, but it's also a hotbed for global conflict.
We're going to war in the South China Sea in 5 to 10 years, aren't we?
Australia is facing pressure from the Pentagon to increase its military presence in the South China Sea.
The United States does not take a position on competing territorial claims.
To Australia's north, several different countries lay competing claims to parts of this body of water, and those overlapping claims mean tensions are constantly brewing. The region is believed to be incredibly rich in natural resources, holding an estimated 11 billion barrels of oil and 190 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. It also accounts for 10% of the world's fisheries, making it a vital food source for hundreds of millions of people. At the same time, around 30% of the world's total shipping trade flows through here. So basically, the South China Sea is kind of a big deal. The biggest dilemma around the South China Sea is who owns what. 6 different countries bordering the ocean mass lay claims to the region, so that's China, Malaysia, Brunei, the Philippines, Vietnam and Taiwan. Most of these countries base their claims off the international law of the sea set out by the United Nations, which states that the country's territorial waters extend 200 miles off their shoreline. This is called the Exclusive Economic Zone, or EEZ. So for example, any oil found 200 miles off the coast of Vietnam would belong to Vietnam. Outside of this, so any further into the ocean than 200 miles, is international waters. Everyone shares that. But there's one country that doesn't believe in using the UN law to determine its claims. When the UN established the 200-mile law in 1973, China was basically like, not for us, and ignored claims made by other countries. China argues it has a historical claim to the South China Sea and set out its own boundaries. China's boundaries, which we call the 9-dash line, encompasses 90% of the South China Sea and crosses into other countries' claims to certain parts of the ocean. Now, why should Australia care? This is happening way north of us and we don't have any claims in the South China Sea. But the United States, one of our closest security allies, has wide-ranging commitments in East Asia. The US doesn't make any of its own claims to the water, but several of its allies border the region. This has led to growing tensions between the US and China in recent years. The US says it has an international obligation to stand by its allies in Asia and ensure the international rule of law is being upheld. China has criticised the US for being too provocative and assertive, and has called on the US Navy to basically back off.
China is building in the South China Sea islands.
In 2016, an international tribunal formally ruled that China has no historical rights to the South China Sea, but Beijing rejected that ruling and continues to build artificial islands in the South China Sea. These growing tensions between the US and China are where Australia comes in. See, we're in kind of an awkward position. The US is Australia's most important military ally. Broadly speaking, they help defend us, we help defend them, and it's all part of a security arrangement and close relationship that we've had with Americans for many decades. But China is our largest trading partner. A third of Australia's exports are shipped to China, meaning we have a dependence on Chinese money, and we don't want to screw that up. Now, ideally, of course, would be Switzerland. That is to say, we'd sit back and be like, guys, we're not getting involved, you can sort this shit out for yourselves, have fun. But it's not quite that simple. The more tensions between the US and China build, the more pressure we face to throw our defence force into the ring alongside the US. And the more willing we appear to do that, the more threats we'll face from China. In previous years, China has directly targeted Australia over the South China Sea through its state media, warning us to keep out. It's hard to tell exactly how the battle over the South China Sea will be resolved, but what we do know is this: peace and stability are never guarantees, and Australia can never fully keep clear of the conflict.